welcome to another episode of Drastic Talks. I'm Courtney Cooper, and my guest this week is Lorri Rowlandson, Senior Vice President of Strategy and Innovation at BGIS, a global leader in facilities management, workplace advisory, and real estate services. Lorri is also the author of The New Normal, How COVID-19 Has Changed the World of Work Forever. For those of you that don't know me, I'm a principal at Elate Partners, which invests in early stage real estate tech companies, and I'm also the co-founder of Proptech Collective, a community that helps bridge the gap between real estate and technology sectors. Lorri, thanks for joining us today. I'm looking forward to
it's such a pleasure, Courtney. It's great to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Of course. I'm looking forward to our conversation about the 5 essentials of the workplace in 2021. Before we jump in, I would love for you to tell us a little bit about yourself and how you approach innovation at BGIS.
Yeah, sure, Courtney, no problem. So my role is global, and it is really around how do we cultivate and hold innovation accountable for performance. So for those of you who don't know BGIS, we're predominantly an engineering kind of culture. So if you've ever worked with engineers, we like to measure everything and look for evidence on everything. So I love that differentiator in how we look at innovation. So we're not into the innovation theater where we do lots of we do pilots, but it doesn't end there. We don't rest until we're sure that the innovation has actually been held accountable for its business case. So we have a very closed loop approach to innovation. We have a nickname for it. We call it practical innovation as well. So, we're talking about, we keep an eye on some of the longer term things, but we also really try to suggest innovations for our clients that will move the needle today or within the next fiscal year. And it's a building block towards a bigger roadmap of progress. But that's how you get innovations approved. That's how you ensure that they make a difference within your tenure in that role. And it's a fairly unique approach, and it holds the entire system accountable to evidence-based outcomes. Our CEO has this expression called inspect what you expect. And I think he got that from something similar to the Malcolm Baldrige model, which is very much an evidence-based outcome, evidence-based approach. So in the way that we approach innovation, it is very much focused on driving a result and not just for marketing purposes, if you will.
Absolutely. I think that's really important. And especially because you innovate within your own company and your culture, but you also advise your clients. And so maybe you could just share a little bit on who are your clients? Like you talked about their occupiers. What kind of clients do you have that you're helping with sort of their innovation strategies as well?
Yeah, Courtney, it's I think I literally have the best job in the world selfishly because I get to work with clients globally. And as you know, different geographies have different areas of focus, and some are really leading globally and some are lagging. So you get to borrow some of that knowledge and share, and then vice versa in some other topics. So BGIS is present in Canada, the US, Australia, New Zealand, and the UK. We have just shy of, I think, 9,000 employees globally. And it's all kinds of sectors, everything from government, deep data center, oil and gas, banking, pharmaceuticals, I mean, telecommunications. So really a very wide spectrum of services, but our real sweet spot is really around technical services. So our evidence and our prevalence of our market share in data centers, the oil and gas industry, and some of the more technical maintenance structures are really, any industry that really depends on that capability, we're in it for sure. And we only deal with occupiers. So we're not on the landlord side. We do some brokerage in some geographies, but we're really around professional services. FM is our core business. We're built for that recurring business, and we really leverage it as an integration platform to be able to evolve our clients' portfolios in a more organic way in what matters.
Absolutely. And because of your focus on occupiers and the global nature of your work and the kinds of companies you see, I'm really particularly excited to talk to you about some of the trends that you're seeing for the workplace in 2021 as we look at the new year. So we got 5 that we're going to go through today. Do you want to kick us off with the first one?
Yeah, sure. So if the theme is around the workplace or trends in 2021, I think the big thing we're going to grapple with, and we kind of got away with it in 2020 because we never really, after March, we never really went back and fully occupied the office. And I think now with the vaccinations coming out and just, more awareness around healthier practices, I think we are going to eventually, at some point in 2021, see a reoccupancy of the office. And I think that might be very different. So managing flow and how you bring people back, I think it's going to be of great interest. Now the rubber hits the road, all that planning. I think in June of last year, we thought everybody was coming back. They didn't for a number of reasons that I won't get into, but they actually, I saw some organizations asking for up to 40% of people back. I think the average was around 15, but we saw some being more aggressive, but their actual results were less than 8%. So I think in 2021, you're going to see a lot more people return, which means that how do you manage flow? How do you coexist with people that are vaccinated and not, and deal with some of those issues? And a lot of it is not technical. It might just be perception. So you've really got to understand what people are wondering about and be able to support them. But any occupancy tracking technology or tools, whether they be reservation systems or the apps that you've used to verify, your screening of the day, space planning, and occupancy sensors are really becoming a much stronger focus. Those organizations that didn't have those basic elements in place in 2020 were just struggling to catch up, but hopefully they're there. But really, the business case for sensors has never been better because organizations are also rationalizing how much space that they need, as well as wanting to see the actual flow of people in the office. So there's plan versus actual. So a number of the things and tools that I mentioned are going to help organizations make sure that that return to office is done so in a healthy and safe way.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, one of our companies, a company called Eden, based out in San Francisco, they have a visitor management platform. And, visitor management was, something that was already gaining steam prior to the pandemic. A lot of people had the tablets at the front door where you could check in and put in your information. Now I think coming back, they're seeing much more demand for employee check-in as well. So, especially if you have, a certain threshold of people that you want in the office, if you're trying to get 50%, or you have any type of flexibility in who's in the office and who's not, being able to check in. And also, for the time being, we're going to need to do health checks. And so be able to answer that questionnaire. So being able to make that easy for employees, but also, a lot of companies, for the first time, all companies in the world at one point in time are considering their real estate strategy. Right. And some people will change dramatically, some won't, but a lot of companies are looking at flexibility and what does it mean? And should we have reserve desks? Should we have bookable desks? And so now if they're going to make these changes, the technology is vital to make sure that this experience is positive and companies are able to your point, understand who's in the office, who's not, how we're using space, how we can better design the space, because, a lot of this is still sort of theory. People talk a lot about what it's going to be like, but companies aren't going to make decisions based on what we all think. They want to figure out when we come back to the office, how do they really redesign based on what makes the most sense for their employees?
You got it. And you touched on something that's really important to underline, Courtney, is a lot of the things you talked about are important for planning, but then there's an actual environment, and there's often a dichotomy between the two, and you have to keep an eye on both so that you can really prepare the proper governance. And this is important because your employees' health and safety is at stake. So if you only, plan for, 20% of the population to come back, and suddenly 70% of the people show up, and you're not ramped up to be able to accommodate that, either from a cleaning or governance perspective, it means that you need to take action. So the two levels that you talked about are often gaps that we see in people's program, in different companies' program. It's the plan versus actual, and it's important that you do both to be able to, really create the safe conditions of a return to office strategy.
And there's one other piece I wanted to go back to. So you talked about sensors, and we've heard a lot about occupant sensors and occupancy tracking, and a lot of companies think it's interesting, but don't necessarily know how to use it. There's concerns about privacy. So maybe you could share just a little bit more on how you think occupancy sensors and occupancy tracking fits in, like what that exactly means, and how that companies can and are using that.
Yeah, so that's a great question. So I'm aware of a wide spectrum of occupancy sensors for exactly the reasons that you're describing. So of course, our clients are everything from government to like .com-esque or union environments, for example. So the spectrum being very conservative in nature and culture to ones that are very progressive. So you have to have a variety of solutions to be able to accommodate that, and we're aware of that. So occupancy tracking is basically some sort of a sensor that counts the number of people coming in and out. So you can get sensors that track heat maps, which give you those beautiful visuals. They're not that useful, to be honest with you, because they just tell you if there's clusters of people in certain areas, but they don't count. But that's one form of occupancy. You can get occupancy trackers that actually are like counters that count people going in and out of certain door areas. You can also track occupancy with your badge in, badge out information, or going through the number of turnstiles if you've got that. But it goes all the way up to artificial intelligence embedded into your security system and cameras that can recognize, okay, Courtney's on the 3rd floor and she came in at 8:43 today. And right now she's sitting in the northwest corner of the 3rd floor. And so there's a wide spectrum there. And you brought up a great point about privacy. And what we always do is try to understand what information the client needs to be able to derive the outcome. And we also make sure that the right approvers are part of the process. So, for example, I would never go to a unionized environment or certain cultures of companies with that artificial intelligence security, because no question there would be some objection related to privacy. However, I've seen companies that actually have microchips installed in their employees' fingers on a voluntary basis, and they just fist bump the vending machine when they want to order something, and the employees are okay with that. Obviously, that's an extreme example, but generally, the sensor that I recommend is just counters. It seems to be very neutral. They don't pick up any individual, like I can't tell it's Courtney, I can tell it's a human. So it won't count like cats or any other warm bodies passing the threshold. It actually will count a human. And they're dumb sensors in a way where they can just count humans and that's it. They can't tell who it is and that sort of thing. And those sensors tend to be the most successful and the most affordable. The other sensors, if you really want to invest in sensors and have them at every work point, so you can see, how many people are sitting in a work setting, that starts to get controversial, because in work settings where people are sitting in the same seat every day, they feel that that's a way of their employer checking up on them, and they're not comfortable with that. And then people start to take them apart, take the batteries out, put tin foil over them, or do crazy things, right? But if you have those counters that just come in and out, and you accompany it with a proper change management strategy where you educate people as to show them the data that comes out of it. There's no camera per se, so it can't actually video anything. It just reads heat, and you actually show them what it does. Then you get a really good outcome. But the change management, as you can tell by, I've got a few t-shirts on this topic, right? The change management and the communication process is very, very important to the occupants. Otherwise, they start fiddling with it or they object in some way.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. I mean, I think it really does depend on what the purpose is. And we've seen success for companies from, university libraries and cafeterias to companies like Deloitte that have agile seating, where all people need to know is this floor busy? If I'm trying to find a space, how busy or free is it to help me decide which floor to go to? And in that case, they don't need any type of personal information. It's really sort of just how many people are on the floor, compared to, if they're trying to understand how do we design a specific floor plate, and, how often are people at their desk, how often are meeting rooms used, and that's to help plan for future design or design changes. So I think you're right. It's totally dependent on the purpose. So if we want to move on to our second trend around wellness and mental health of employees, what are you seeing in the workplace or expecting for 2021?
Well, you know what, Courtney, in the last year, one of the topics that I'm really delighted has been elevated. Unfortunately, it's been elevated due to difficult circumstances, but nonetheless, is the topic of employee wellness and well-being, and specifically around mental health. This is very important to me, and I'm really pleased to see this topic be elevated from our subconscious minds to our conscious minds. So it's no secret that in the last 9 months, people, in 2020, people really struggled with isolating and working remotely. And it's not because of work ethic or being able to be individually productive, but humans are social creatures. Even the introverts are social creatures. And if you're early in your career, if you have a role that depends on collaboration like mine and innovation is always better in person. It was a hard year, and it took its toll at home without having that variety and that stimulation and that downtime. You felt like you were always on and all that pressure. So I am really pleased to see the topic of wellness and well-being elevated, and specifically not just physical health, which I know was, I would say before COVID, was really catching fire. Like whether it be Fitwell, Well Building Institute, et cetera, a number of those certifications have popped up, and I think we're getting really great traction. You have some incredible authors, Leah Stringer, Rex Miller, great authors in our profession that have been elevating the awareness and the business case of physical features and design features at work that contribute to employee wellness. But the mental health portion has really been elevated, and I've seen so many companies really taking that seriously, investing in it, and supporting their employee community. So the whole topic of wellness and well-being, mental and physical, have really elevated. And I think, hey, Courtney, you remember when LEAD first came out and people were like not sure about it? And then it took a couple of years and then everybody loved it. I think that COVID has done I think COVID has really accelerated that adoption to well building or fit well or wellness at work. We've actually skipped a few years of evolution thanks to COVID, and obviously very difficult badges to earn during that time. But I'm really pleased to see that concept accelerated, and only for our betterment.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Like, we've talked about air quality over the past 2 years. That's something that we've seen a lot more companies popping up to help occupiers understand the air quality, or to help landlords better manage it. But we always have this question of we believe this is something that's going to be important, but it doesn't necessarily have market traction. Occupiers aren't asking about it enough yet. And then all of a sudden COVID comes along, and everyone learns more than they wanted to know about how germs and sickness spreads through the air. And so now air quality is top of mind. And we all know the feeling of when there's poor air quality, when there's poor lighting, people are less productive, right? Like, you feel it, rooms that are draining versus ones that help you be at your best. So I think that from a building perspective, though, from the real estate owners as well as the occupiers, there's definitely a focus on how do you create, what does it mean to be a healthy building, and what does it mean to design healthy workplaces that help people be at their best. And there's also, an aspect now that there might be a requirement to be more competitive and create spaces that attract people back to the workplace, because we've learned that there's other settings where people can work. There's flexibility can be a good thing, but there's also a strong importance of having people back in the office, and how do we make the office the best place for them to work and be productive, especially for collaborative tasks or certain types of tasks.
I completely agree with you. And I think companies shouldn't neglect the opportunity to ask that demographic of employees that have those needs. I think that one of the things about these programs is often, the real go-getters, the people that are normally very active in fitness and otherwise, will instantly adopt it and want to do it. But these programs should be also designed for those people who need it. And sometimes those aren't always the people that step forward. So I really encourage you to ensure that you're creating, you're soliciting a diversity of opinions of people. Give those people an opportunity to make a difference in the lives of other employees as well as themselves. And these are normally people that feel uncomfortable with this topic or would shy away from it. But if you invite them to be part of a solutioning committee, then you're solving for that demographic of people that is just like them. And so please ensure that you're including a diversity of opinions and not just those normal go-getters.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. It's been a tough year and everyone's had their different reasons, and been, there's been a lot of burnout. A lot of people have been working hard and having a hard time separating. And we don't really have a clear idea of how long it takes people to get back to the office. Is it going to be like before? What's going to change? And it obviously is going to be company dependent. So I think you're completely right to be thinking about how do you and I think there's a positive to it, right? Like, how do we design the best places for people to work and help our people be at the best? And we've learned a lot of positive things about how well people can work under, more challenging circumstances or remotely. So how do we now take what we've learned about how people can be productive and motivated in different environments, and how do we figure out what is the right balance for different people, for different roles, and how do we really focus on collaborating and building connections at work for the people who can be together in the office, so where that makes sense. But also, we have global companies, so people, are not always going to be together all the time. So, maybe we've learned some practices through this that help us connect with our colleagues that live in Calgary or Vancouver or Singapore, that will help us have stronger communities now that we've, maybe adopted some more virtual practices, which I know we'll talk a little bit about in a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, we did a whole program for our clients on the touchless office or the contactless office, because we don't think this is our last pandemic that we're going to have, and it can't hurt to include design features that really promote health and safety. And again, this is not an amenity. This is about health and safety. We as executives have an imperative to do something for our employees that protect them. And health and safety is a non-negotiable. I know in our company, we start every meeting with a safety moment. Health and safety is very important. So investment in things like the touchless office or contactless office is something that is going to continue to have longevity and is going to continue to promote the health of your employees at the office. And then we will get into virtual culture in a moment. Yeah.
Absolutely. But before we do, we're going to move on to our third trend around data and analytics.
Yeah, data. I mean, this was something that was really strong out of the gate before COVID, but is just continuing to accelerate. In fact, I would say that COVID is, again, I talk about this in my book as well, is a catalyst, an accelerant for the data imperative. So again, those companies, back to our first point, Courtney, those companies that weren't prepared with reservation systems or space planning and the kind of data that they need for planning purposes were really caught flat-footed to be able to plan in the immediate future. But data is important for rationalization of space and how we respond to this to needs. So data is more important now than ever to foster decisions around for management planning, also for right sizing the portfolio, and third, understanding employee needs. So again, the three are planning, right sizing, and responding to employee needs. So one of the data sets I would like to remind everybody of is, the best sensors are people. And what in surveying individuals and their perceptions is valid data. It's not just sensor data. And so making sure you have a mechanism to, in a recurring way, understand the needs of your employees. And some of the big tech companies do this, and they did this before COVID. They would constantly survey their employees, and they would do the heck out of whatever their employees told them. They trusted their employees to tell them what they needed to be productive. And I think now we've arrived, I mean, some of those leading edge companies are early adopters, and then it takes a couple of years before the industry catches up. But I think a systemic way of really understanding employee needs and responding to them is going to be ingrained going forward as a valid data source. But I think organizations are really focused on getting that data that they need to inform decisions. And by the way, many organizations are about to embark on significant transformations in their business. You alluded to it earlier, Courtney, about using the office for a different purpose. Well, if you're going to go to your board with a pretty, a transformation price tag on how you're going to use the office, how you're going to shed space, how you're going to transform the space you do have, you really need data to do that. Let's face it, the people that approve the business case are usually left brain people. Your CFO, the head of, your C-suite people are usually fairly left brained. They need the data to be able to approve it. So that comes from not just the data from your systems, but it comes from the data of your employees. So please consider both passive and active, technology driven, as well as human driven data to inform your decisions and put forward in your business cases.
We could have a whole session just to unpack that. But one thing to say, and one thing that that I've noticed here is that, a lot of companies talk about the future of work and what it's going to be like, and will people be remote or in the office? And the companies that are doing this best, if you look at what they're saying and what they're doing, there's some companies that are leading in this area. They've already made announcements. They're going to go virtual first, but they know and they say like this requires large investment. This probably requires larger investment in technology than we've ever had before, and it also requires teams that are going to monitor how people are doing, what's working, what's not, productivity. So, I think we're going to see what happens. But if you're going to change the way your company works, it's not just what we're doing now, working from home and just continuing that is not working. So if you're going to make any changes at all, it requires incredible thought and time and effort and data. And so I think we're going to see, I think some companies are saying already, we're not going to wait. We're going to reshape our cultures. And I think a lot of other companies are waiting to see, and they're going to learn and take feedback, and it'll happen over a much longer time, or they'll go back to work and decide that, we're still going to be a mostly in-office company, but we're going to have more flexibility. So there's a lot to happen, but these are major changes, and companies could, you could ruin your company by taking the wrong step and just going fully remote without really thinking through how people work and how you create a culture that can be successful in different types of environments.
That's a good segue to our fourth item, Courtney. Nicely done. And our fourth item is around virtual culture. And so that's become a thing. I mean, it was always a thing, but it's really, again, been elevated, I think, from our subconscious to our conscious mind. So whether you think about it in the context of the gig economy or mobility and people working remotely, there's no question that 2020 has been a catalyst for virtual work and the virtual work environment and the maturity of that. And I think about a year ago, and hey, Courtney, like, how would you say your comfort level was with, Zoom or Teams and those types of tools a year ago? Like, what was your default? Was it a conference call or a phone call or an email?
We were a bit early adopters because we always found that when we were talking to founders, we liked to use video, but that would only ever if they were in another city, for example. Like, we didn't really video chat with people that were in Toronto. We would always meet or it'd be a quick phone call, but video was kind of reserved for if we were working with colleagues that were lived in a different city, or when we were talking to founders elsewhere. But it wasn't part of the practice as much. And I would say there was definitely times when we were doing conference calls with somebody in a different city, and I much would have rather been on video because, it's not perfect. Like, being in person can be great. Video can be great for certain purposes, but, over the phone, sometimes you can't get the nuances. You know what I mean? They're pausing, but are they thinking what's going on? So not as much video as today.
Well, even if you were doing video a year ago, I would say you were in the progressive quartile, because a year ago, I think most people, if they had a group call, they would do it on conference call. and it was just verbal, no visual. And it feels a little two-dimensional given our expertise today. I mean, the other alternative is I can remember flying to a meeting that was like an hour meeting. So we'd get on an airplane and fly. And that almost seems crazy given our current level of expertise with some of the remote technologies and video. I think, even if we go back to whatever normal is, personally, I think I would have a hard time just going back to the boring old two-dimensional conference call because of the points that you raised, is that the richness, the engagement that you get is so much better. And I think the other thing is, I realize it's beyond the conference call, it's beyond video. We use Teams in our company, and I am delighted with the plugins and all of the apps that you can embed, whether it be analytics or virtual yellow pad sessions and all of those things. As an innovation person, I really missed having in person. There's some pretty incredible electronic tools, and I'm even starting to experiment with virtual reality now, virtual reality meetings. But all of that to say that I think we're starting to see an acceleration of things like chief culture officer. And a culture officer would contemplate the fact that you would have some demographic of people in the office, some demographic of people that only come into the office sometimes, some people, employees that work remote all the time, and like a gig economy extension of, that are contractors is the way we used to say it, but gig economy. These are people, these are temporary workers that are part of our company. And how we create that virtual culture, if you're not in the office every day, is very important. That's how you spawn loyalty. That's how you spawn work ethic and commitment. That's how you spawn productivity. So we've really blown the doors off of it just being like a 1.2 or a 1.4 to 1 kind of mobility strategy to something that is a much more mature and sophisticated remote work strategy that we need to accommodate from a culture perspective. Because I think that's another symptom of what we're feeling in 2020 is it's a bit of a problem. We're not feeling that sense of belonging. We're not feeling that sense of variety. So how do you create a virtual culture? And what are the tools that do you need to sustain that has been a big part of our lessons of maybe School of Hard Knocks in some cases in 2020. But I actually am quite excited as to how we've accelerated that topic in 2020. And again, I think how it was coming anyway, but I think we skipped 2 or 3 years. There's a quote I saw on LinkedIn not that long ago that COVID has done more for the progress of organizations than any chief innovation officer, somebody with a role like me. And I agree with that. Whereas you would have to do it in a more consensus basis, now we have to do it out of necessity. So I think you're going to see some extremely cool things come up in the next 12 months related to virtual culture and the technologies that support that. So spoiler alert on that.
Well, I've always liked the quote, everything in moderation, including moderation. And I think from a video perspective, we went from 0 to 100. You know what I mean? So we people didn't do it, and then it was all they did, and it's too much, right? Like,
yeah,
video calls all day long is not appropriate. It is not a thing. It doesn't work. But I think that figuring out when do we have in-person meetings, when do we have video meetings, what communication is Slack versus email? Like, we just need to figure out sort of those new normals and new sort of communication hygiene that makes this the most effective. And to your point, we're seeing, particularly from startups, use of video message, like companies like Loom that allow companies to like very, very easily send and record video messages. Or, if I was going to show you how to do something, I can very quickly do it on my screen and just send you, hey, here's the recording of how you do this or how you find this. Same thing on knowledge management systems, right? A lot of companies are built on institutional knowledge in people's brains. And so more companies, wherever they work, whether that's in the office or remotely, are starting to think about how do we, organize our information a bit better. And there's a lot more search tools that make it easier. So, you kind of think of the Google for our organization. How do we do this? Where do I find this? that's becoming easier and easier. So I think to your point, there's lots of cool automation, lots of cool companies that are now going to make it easier to work. And again, it's these are things that it doesn't matter if you're going to be virtual or in the office. I think these types of tools are going to stay and make us better.
Yeah, you got it. Exactly. And I think we're going to see some really interesting and sophisticated solutions in this way, because attending to virtual culture, I think, was an issue prior to COVID. I think COVID has just elevated into a new sense of focus and maturity. So stay tuned for some really cool virtual teaming, and we'll continue to get smarter in this area. But right now it is a little bit of the Wild West. To your point, right? Like we were immersed in this, and humans need variety and change, which is why I think from 0 to 100 was unsatisfactory. It's not that Zoom meetings are unsatisfactory. It's just 120% of Zoom meetings every day is unsatisfactory.
Yeah.
So, but I'm really starting to see some of the levels of sophistication, and I mean, virtual reality is maybe one of the more extreme items, but just even in some of the plugins in Teams are so cool and are even better in some cases than in person. So, but I still think it's fairly nascent. We're going to hear a lot more over that in the next 12 months. And Courtney, in 2008, I speak about this in one of my other talks, but 2008 was a really challenging year from a recession perspective in North America. And there were some incredible companies that were born out of that time, born out of adverse conditions, and now are trillion-dollar companies. So in addressing virtual culture, I think there's some trillion-dollar companies that are being born right now in 2020. And you're going to see some unbelievable options for people that want to work in that whole virtual culture category. I think is going to explode over the next couple of years. And in 5 years, it'll be like how we are now from a year ago. We'll go, how did we ever live without this? When you actually look at some of the big companies that were born from that time, we think, how could we have ever lived without this? So they're going to become mainstays with us in the not too distant future.
Absolutely. And I think that we're sort of starting to get into our last of the 5 trends around employee experience, and particularly what employee experience ambassadors are like.
Yeah, we've tended to, I think, the virtual side of things. And so there's a lot of people who debate with me, and I love debate, by the way, about the office and how the office is so important. And I agree. I agree with everybody, by the way, but I think it's not an all or none. I mean, there's been some very melodramatic, expressions, death of the office, and some really salacious things, which I think are ridiculous. But I think that now the gauntlet has been thrown down. Is we have to make the office, if you really want to make the office on equal level of competition with virtual work, we have to make the office a destination, an exciting destination of where employees want to work. We have to make it the most productive place that they could ever contemplate to work. Driving into the office is no problem because I love the office. It's so exciting. And by the way, 3 years ago, driving into the office to sit in my beige oatmeal colored cubicle is maybe not as inspiring as some of the other options that are out there. So organizations that have already adopted a very dynamic mobility or really understand the needs of their employees and can respond to them are at an advantage. But organizations, I think, are going to have to really figure out how to make the office a destination of where employees want to work. So one of the things that we've started doing at BGIS, and it's not new, but it really came into its own. I'm going to say we have quite a substantial number of workplace experience ambassadors or workplace ambassadors. There's a number workplace concierges. There's a whole bunch of different terms of different companies, but you get the idea. It's an individual or a team of individuals at the office that really create an incredible experience, that Disney-like experience working at the office. And so they're there to drive convenience. They're there to drive productivity. they realize that we hire the best talent. We don't want to distract them from figuring out how to fill up the photocopier or how to order catering and things like that. They are like a shared assistant at the office that really drives convenience. And we figured out how to really ingrain them into our facilities management services. So I think the mistake I see some companies is, it's not just a greeter at the front desk. It says, "Hi, welcome to fill in company name here." These people are really more like an FM1 kind of a role, where they're problem solvers. They take pictures of the ceiling tile that's missing, a light that's out. They send in FM work orders. They reach out proactively, and they understand, they recognize, they read body language, and they realize when somebody's frustrated, and they approach them appropriately. How can I help you today? How can I make your day better today? Is the catch line that we use. And they help offer to solve things in the moment. And it's a blend, I would say, between some soft services and technical services. And these people can do security, they do light sanitization and janitorial services. They engage the employees, and they're experts about everything in that particular building, and they will go get you whatever they need. And that, again, is not new, but it's something that really exploded in its business case and opportunity. So those of our BGIS clients that actually incorporated workplace experience professionals were really at an advantage during COVID and post-COVID. Because the other thing these people would do, these workplace experience ambassadors, would be, if I saw you, one of our policies at BGIS is, that in addition to distancing, is you can't travel through the building without a face covering. And so if I'm thinking about something, and this actually happened to me, and I was thinking hard, my brain was smoking, and I had to go to the bathroom. So I got up and I was thinking. I went to the bathroom. I forgot my face covering because I was sitting at my desk. There was nobody around me. I took my face covering off. Went into the bathroom and I saw one of these ambassadors, and they said, "How are you, Lorri? How you doing?" They remembered my name. And then they said, "Do you need a face covering? I've got some spares. I'm happy to give you one." And I was like, "Oh my gosh, I know the rules. I'm so sorry. I forgot. No, I have one at my desk. I'm good, but I'm so sorry." And they educate you in the moment, all of this to say, "Or do you know the directions are this way?" And it's not a finger wagging exercise. It's a helpful exercise. Like, "Lorri, did you forget your mask? Because I'll give you one right here. Here's one right here." And I think that they have been a big part of the governance of COVID. And especially, again, back to our first point, Courtney, is managing the return to office. They have been the secret weapon for that, because their role is so diverse. And we're used to thinking in these staccato verticals around cleaners and receptionists and security and. And so this hybrid role is really magical, because they take accountability for everything in such a pleasant way. And so last year I went to Disney University, and we used that to infuse a lot of those principles in the way that we manage our experience officers. But they're really there to be helpful. They are also sensors, and they tell us things that we could do to continuously improve. Like, "Hey, Lorri, there's a lineup at the microwave at lunch. Maybe we need to buy another microwave." Or remind people, send out a memo that there are 5, microwaves in the cafeteria that they can use. Or, they monitor constraint points, and they really help educate and inform for continuous improvement. And I got to tell you, those, beyond just putting the tape on the floor and the signs up on the wall, that's not going to cut it. That's a very passive approach. And so these ambassadors create a very active approach to managing, making people feel comfortable. And I felt, the last thing I'll say is, I felt very good when I was reprimanded for not wearing a mask, because I felt that the company and its training was working. And I felt protected as an employee, that they would speak up and say something to somebody else. And if they didn't say something, and again, as an executive wandering the halls, that, they might be reluctant, but no, I should have been wearing a mask, and I was just not present and I forgot. I felt great that I was reprimanded, and I felt confident that they would do the same for other people in a very collegial way. And I felt like my health and safety was a focus. And so I liked being coached in that moment. So anyway, all of that to say, I think these experience ambassadors are, if you have them, they can be leveraged for much broader purposes in 2021 and beyond as you create an incredible brand of your office going forward.
I mean, there are specific people on the cleaning staff and security guards that have always like made me feel good. You know what I mean? When you come into the office and they say hello and they say it's so nice to see you, and they clearly recognize you, and they're also just like, they're happy in their job, they're happy to see you. Like that creates just a great experience when you enter your office or when you interact with anyone. And I think that a lot of real estate companies and occupiers are thinking a bit more about, how do we bring that hospitality like experience to everything that we do, and how do we get smarter about it? And I think your point is spot on with the idea of how do we integrate technology and people. And one of our companies, Lane, is a tenant experience platform for the office. And one of the things that's always stuck out to me is that technology is great, but technology like requires a strategy, and a strategy that goes alongside of it. And I think that strategy from a real estate owner and landlord and property manager perspective is evolving. Is it what do people want in the workplace? Is it gym classes, or are there other things that people want that are going to make it more attractive to be in the office and make their day easier and connect them better into the retail and amenities and services, getting lunch, doing your dry cleaning? How do you make that experience in the office easy and seamless? But I think that, to your point, that the people matter. And so, some landlords are considering, a different kind of role or different training for the people that are in their lobbies, so that they have that experience continue from the moment you walk into the building, and through every interaction with the building, and same thing with employers in the office.
Yeah, I love you got it, Courtney. You're so right. And your example of the dry cleaner, I think, is a really good one. And I use that in often my workshops, whereas the dry cleaner may have been important in the past because it was, in more formal settings. But maybe if we're going to something a bit more informal, I would number one, check the traffic to that amenity. Let's call it an amenity of any, it's a dry cleaner, but let's call it an amenity. Check the traffic to that amenity. And number two, ask your employees, what would be the best amenity that would make your life better and make you want to come to the office? Given the casual dress code, it might not be the dry cleaner anymore. It might be dog sitting. It might be daycare. It might be, I don't know, something else. It might be computer repair, so I don't have to spend downtime. But check with your employees to see what workplace amenities are relevant for them, because it's probably evolving going forward.
Yeah, there was one company, I don't know the name I'm forgetting the name offhand of which company this was, but they were using Eden's platform that helped them communicate with their cleaners and have a regular cleaning routine. And for them, what was important was the little things in the office, right? Like the worst thing is when you go up, you're in a meeting, you go up to the whiteboard, you go to draw, and you start writing, and the pen is out of ink and people can't see it, right? So one of the things that they had their cleaners do is when you were cleaning on a Monday, they just tested the ink in the whiteboard markers, and they just replaced them. Because that's just one of those things that causes an annoyance in the office. And we all know the experience of trying 10 pens and none of them. Right. So I think it's the little things, but all of these things together have a really big impact on our productivity experience.
That's actually in scope for our experience ambassadors. Meeting room productivity is a big thing. They go in and reset the room, make sure the whiteboards are clean, make sure that the TV is functioning. If there's somebody that comes in the room and they don't have the right connector, they're there in like 2 minutes with the right connector. And you got it. One of my biggest pet peeve is whiteboard markers. Every day they check the whiteboard markers, because they wander. Let's face it. Is there an eraser in the room? It's such a simple thing. But if I don't have to take 10 minutes out of my valuable meeting time to go and chase somebody down to go and find them, if I can even get them at all, it adds up. And I know I have a whole other talk on the business case of productivity, but it's a little thing, but it means a lot because it says your attention to detail. And what that tells employees to do is also take the same consideration in the attention to detail. They talk about that in Disney University. If all of you are following the same guidelines of excellence, then it forces everybody else to up their game. And that I think is, we soar with the eagles or we fly with the turkeys kind of thing. So it's important that we, if you're surrounded with that environment, you want to be a better person, you want to be a better contributor to the workplace. So it's a small and subtle thing, but it actually does a lot psychologically for our employee base towards excellence.
Yeah, one of the worst things is coming to a meeting with 15 people and you're running it, and then it takes 15 minutes to get the tech up and running. So I hope that is a thing of the past. But we are getting close to time. So I think there was one quick bonus one that we wanted to fit in. So maybe we can go very quickly on what's the bonus trend for 2021.
Oh yeah. Okay, bonus item number 6. I know we said 5, Courtney, but I've never been able. So Gen X, are you a millennial?
Technically, yes.
Yeah, technically. So one thing about Gen X, I'll tell you, because we don't talk about Gen X very often, is that we like grew up listening to the Clash and the Sex Pistols, so we're a little bit rebellious. We used to have weird haircuts and all of that, so we don't like coloring between the lines. So and somebody says come up with a top 5, I always end up having a top 6. So the 6th item I think is related to sustainability. And one of the things I mean, this is a real passion for me personally, as well as our company and our CEO, like beyond passionate. I'm really delighted to see the level of interest and impact that 2020 has created on climate change. And so we saw the impact in many cities and many countries of the work in like shelter in place. And so we had less pollution, water clarified. There's lots of stories around how our actions as humans really benefited the environment. We changed the discussion to around flattening the climate curve. I think a lot of our discussion around flattening the COVID curve could translate very well to climate. And I think that it has just elevated the interest and focus and investment on climate change. And I think those organizations that are really committed to it will really invest in allowing people to work, to choose where they work and how they're productive, which I feel is synonymous. It's integrated into how we will benefit our corporations from a sustainability perspective. And so I really feel that we've accelerated a lot of sustainability interests in 2020. And I feel we'll continue on with that beyond 2021.
Yeah, ESG is a core focus for us, as well as a lot of our real estate partners. It's very exciting and encouraging to see the news every day of a new company stating their goals around ESG or sustainability or impact investing. Like, these are the largest companies in the world that have taken a stake and said that they are focused on net zero, or they're focusing on reducing their impact. And so this is something that's very important to the next generation, to everyone here. So I think that, that is going to be something that continues and just picks up steam. So Lorri, that brings us to the end of our 5+1 trends for the workplace for 2021. So just to summarize, we started with occupancy management and flow management, wellness and mental health, data and analytics, virtual culture and teaming, employee experience ambassadors, and sustainability. So thank you for taking the time. Lorri, if people want to learn more about you or reach out, where can they find you?
Yeah, please reach out on LinkedIn. We have an amazing following on LinkedIn, which is an incredible group of professionals that just share information openly and freely. And I also share that, and I don't care if you work for a competitor. We have a small industry. We need to help each other. People move around. Sometimes they're a competitor, sometimes they're a client. I don't care. At this point in my career, I just really want to make a difference in our profession and help the people that are in it. So please reach out to me on LinkedIn, and you'll really benefit from a lot of the great information that our incredible circle of people share freely and circulate.
I always enjoy the articles you post post on LinkedIn. So I'll continue to follow you. I encourage everyone to do the same. If you want to contact me, the best place is also on LinkedIn. Thanks everyone for tuning in. You can find more from Drastic Talks on Drastic Summit's YouTube channel. You can listen to these types of podcasts on your favorite podcast app, or just visit the website drasticsummit.com/talks. Thank you for Drastic Summit for having us, and thank you all for tuning in. Hope everyone has a great day.